everyone, Nick Quaid here, campaign manager, Tim Utzfer House. I'm with Tim today. How you doing, Tim?
Doing really good, Nick. Nice to see you.
This is the second in a series of fireside chats that we're bringing to you. This particular one deals with the February forecast that was just released a few days ago. We attended the preview, which was last night down at the state capitol. And Tim, did the February forecast turn out the way that you expected?
Yes, Nick, back in November, you and I sat on the November forecast, and we, after the meeting, we talked about it. We figured $6 to $8 billion shortfall we had projected. During the last couple, 3 months, we've been ridiculed and minimized for our projections, and to everybody's shock, it did come out at $6.4 billion. The media, the state forecast, and the legislators would like you to think it's about $4.5 billion. They arrived at $4.5 billion by taking the stimulus money and subtracting it from the real budget shortfall, and the real budget shortfall is projected at $6.4 billion for the next biennium.
Does that stimulus money have any strings attached, or is just a blank check to stabilize our budgets?
There's a lot of strings attached to with any federal dollars, and so in this $4.7 billion, there is a lot of money, a lot of strings attached, and the state of Minnesota could spend up to $1 billion additional dollars out of our own pocket in order to get to a total of $4.7 billion from the federal government.
Typical. What are some observations that you had after looking more closely at the numbers that were presented?
Well, one thing I want to do is, you and I learned yesterday, there's this organization called Global Insight. We will be doing a video. We have to do some more research, but we will do a video on Global Insight. And Global Insight is an organization that's for proprietary information. They do data research and information and provide it to anybody in the world, and you can buy into this. Minnesota apparently has bought into this program, and the state economist uses the data from Global Insight to do their forecasts. And so what we learned is that there is a lot of discrepancy between the reality of the forecasts that we get in the last 10 years and the budget and income and income for the state. One area was inflation, and I just want to bring that up. Back in November, the forecast put in about $650 million for inflation for this biennium that we're discussing now at the legislature. The February forecast, surprisingly, reduced that number to $170 million. Why, I'm not really sure, because according to all this data and all the research and all the statistics, including this chart that you have here, inflation, or CPI, Consumer Price Index, is increasing. And according to this forecast of the budget that we have, there basically will be no inflation in the next 2 years. Now, I don't know about everybody else out there, but I see it every day when I go shopping.
Absolutely.
Spend my money.
The grocery store and the gas pumps, etc. It looks here as though the CPI went up 0.3% in January, so that seems as though they're kind of playing with the numbers a little bit.
I would say so. By just adjusting the inflation numbers, they're able to save $500 million on their projected shortfall. So yes, that would be. There appears to be some fantasy, what we would call fantasyland mathematics in the budget forecast.
And for those of you interested, the broad line of inflation measure also leaves out energy and housing when it calculates those numbers, which I think represent a large number as well. What implication do you think there is from this revised forecast, as well as the stimulus, on the governor's budget?
Well, one of the key components of the governor's budget was the bonding, which we believe is unconstitutional to bond $1 billion to pay interest on interest you already have on debt. The other part of it, component that the governor had, was about $920 million worth of stimulus package. The governor proposed or expected to have almost $1 billion at his free will to spend how he saw fit. The fine print, which always comes with federal dollars, prohibits, basically, from what we learned last night, the governor's budget from doing that. So that the governor now has to make up his $950 million in his budget, which we will be seeing in the next couple of weeks, and you and I will be going over his budget.
Yep.
Trying to rationalize it, and we'll bring it to the people so you guys can know what's going on with this budget. And of course the Democrats will have their shot at chopping it up into pieces as they have this previous budget that the governor presented.
But it appears as though, from the words around the campfire down at the Capitol, the Democrats aren't presenting a plan. So
Apparently not. I think they're kind of waiting for the governor.
Did Dr. Stinson say anything that sparked an interest in his testimony? Any key phrases or anything that he talked about in particular?
Well, some questions were brought to the doctor about his view on what's gonna define a rebound in the economy.
Yeah.
And one of the things he said is our economy now, over the years, has become a 70% consumer spending economy. So until the consumers start spending, don't expect a recovery. Another point that was made is job loss, national job loss. And the projections are, which you and I both believe are low, is that in the next 5 quarters, which would bring us to next summer, there'll be 3 million jobs lost across the nation.
Yeah.
The problem we have with the forecast that came out yesterday by the state is the state is showing a recovery period starting this summer, which is 12 to 14 months ahead of the actual bleeding of people losing their jobs. So as
3
long as
million.
people are losing their jobs, they're not gonna be spending, and if we don't have spending, according to the Keynesian theory here, we will not have a recovery. So there's a big disconnect, and our budget is based on a recovery for Minnesota, of a recovery starting now, and we really aren't gonna have a recovery for at least a year and a half or whenever.
I believe I recall Representative Kiffmeyer asking Dr. Stinson if an increase in taxes ultimately affects the dollars in your average citizen's pocketbooks, if that has an effect on consumer spending. Do you remember what he had to say about that?
Well, to my surprise, the doctor suggested that the state legislators spend more money to tax and spend more to get the economy going again. The problem with that I have is I have a limited resources like most people do, and every dollar that the state takes out of my pocket, that's one less dollar that I can spend to live on. So you and I both talked also that that's something we, as the average guy on the street, would not necessarily agree with, that taking money out of my pocket helps me.
Yeah. What lies ahead for Minnesota in the next coming months here?
Well, as we've been watching down at the state capitol with over 1,100, I think there's 1,200, 1,300 bills being introduced. Without any controls, it's gonna be spending money and increasing taxes. There's a lot of shifting, there's a lot of talk down there at the capitol about taking the stimulus package and padding current funding levels, taking those resources that they save by padding the funding levels and putting them into new programs. I don't see, you and I said, we don't see any difference down there. The second thing, I just wanna remind people that for every $1 billion that the state spends, is $200 out of your pocket. So if there's a family of 5 people, here's for every $1 billion that the state does spend, that's gonna be $1,000 out of your family's budget. Another thing we talked about too was introducing, bills introduced on,
Lack of, when you're
Oh,
talking
yeah,
about bills
excuse me.
introduced,
That's right. There's a lot of bills being introduced, hundreds of millions of dollars, and the budgeting is not in a 2010-11 budget. It's in a 12 and 13 budget. And the reason is because these legislators want to pass additional laws, programs, and so on. They understand they can't raise the money now, but they want to pass the laws now so that they get funded in the second biennium from now, which is 12 and 13.
what was the projected budget deficit in this forecast for 12 and 13?
The governor's budget for 12 and 13, previously to the stimulus package, was an estimated $2.5 billion shortfall in 12 and 13. Last night we learned, now they're projecting a $5.1 billion shortfall, excluding inflation, which right now we both agree is way underestimated by this budget forecast, but this budget forecast says a $1.4 billion inflation, so we're looking at $6.5 billion shortfall in 12 and 13. At minimum, and like you and I had talked, right now I'm gonna make a sad projection, but I'm saying within a year from now, the 12 and 13 budget could be as much as $10 to $12 billion in the hole. That's what I'm gonna project now. Now, like I said, since last summer when we ran for office, I said there would be a $4 or $5 billion shortfall in November. Everybody said $1 billion, and I was mocked at. The same thing happened in November when the forecast came out between November and now, and we were correct again, and everybody else was wrong. And I'm going to make this projection that the way things are going, we're going to be $10 to $12 billion short in 12 and 13 within a year in the next forecast that comes out. The economy's not improving, the budget numbers are wrong, the spending is not stopping, the the baseline that the economist uses for projecting our state's economy, the baseline is off.
Well, it looks like we have a lot of work coming down the track, and we're going to be reporting more information on you with the governor's revised budget projections coming up here and Global Insights. So thank you, Tim, and have a wonderful evening.